Imagine if the Alpha Legion was just doing the longest con in history and screwed the entirety of chaos in one glorious backstab. That line earned over 1,000 upvotes on a recent Traitor Primarchs video, with no serious counterargument in the thread beneath it. When you lay out the evidence piece by piece, it isn't as crazy as it sounds. But to get anywhere close to that conclusion, you have to start with a category error that has been muddying this conversation for decades. In Warhammer 40k, traitor is a political designation. It means you rebelled against the Emperor and the Imperium. It does not automatically mean you worship chaos. Those are two entirely separate categories, one political, one theological, and treating them as synonymous is what makes the Alpha Legion question feel settled when it's genuinely, canonically open. Conrad Kurz is the cleanest proof available, and his case is worth spending a moment on because it establishes the exact parallel the Alpha Legion argument requires. The Night Haunter was the primarch of the Night Lords, one of the 9 traitor legions. He participated in the Horus heresy on the traitor side. His legion committed some of the most extreme atrocities in the conflict. None of that is disputed. And yet the answer to whether Kurz personally worshipped a chaos god is consistent across every piece of lore that addresses him. He didn't. The Warhammer 40k wiki describes him from the start as a dark and haunted figure, obsessed by death and judgment, and unshakable in his belief in the fundamental fallibility of humanity. His rebellion wasn't theological. It was nihilistic, fatalistic, driven by visions of doom and a conviction that the Emperor's project was built on hypocrisy. His Night Haunter identity appears in the lore as a dissociative construct, a psychological persona built to separate himself from the guilt of what he inflicted. Not a chaos-granted power or a gift from any ruinous power. He rebelled on his own terms, answering to nobody, serving nothing beyond his own bleak worldview. The Night Lords reflect this in the game's mechanics. Standalone codexes belong to legions devoted to specific chaos gods, Emperor's Children for Slanesh, World Eaters for Khorne, Thousand Suns for Tzeentch, Death Guard for Nurgle. Night Lords have no patron. No standalone codex, neither do the Iron Warriors. Neither does the Alpha Legion. All three carry the Chaos Undivided classification, defined in canon as venerating chaos as a totality, a single universal force, rather than a specific patron power. But the category also contains something more ambiguous, using what chaos offers as a means to separate ends, without genuine theological commitment to the ruinous powers at all. The Warhammer 40k fandom wiki classifies the Alpha Legion as traitor chaos undivided, possibly still loyal. That ambiguity isn't a gap in the lore. Dan Abnett, who wrote the foundational Alpha Legion novel Legion, has described the logic of their position as a loyalty through treachery paradox, which isn't the language of authorial accident. That's deliberate framing of a deliberate design. So if traitor doesn't mean chaos servant, and if the published classification acknowledges the loyalty question is open, then the entire conversation changes. To understand why, you need to go back to a world called Eolith, 42 Hydra Tertius, approximately a year and a half before the first shots of the Horus heresy were fired at Istvan III. The Cabal was unlike any organization in 40k lore. Not a chaos warband, not an imperial institution, not an Eldar craft world. A multi-species secret organization whose operatives were drawn from more than 1,000 different intelligent Xenos races. Eldar, mechanical life forms, energy-based beings, non-corporeal entities, insectoid, avian, and reptilian species. With the declared purpose, confirmed in the Fandom Wiki's Cabal article, of the eradication of chaos. Their operational claim was that they had been fighting the primordial annihilator for longer than humanity existed as a thinking species. Their most critical tool was something called the Acuity, not standard Eldar far-seeing, an enhanced form of psychic precognition far beyond the capabilities available to even the most powerful Eldar farseers. capable of projecting the course of galactic events across thousands of years of history. The inner circle controlled and shaped the acuity, and that inner circle included beings of extraordinary age. The only member positively identified by imperial sources was a reptilian Xenos named Gehet, belonging to a species whose origins predated even the Eldar, a being John Grammaticus, the Cabal's primary human agent, referred to as one of the old kind, potentially related to the old ones themselves. Their infrastructure matched their ambition, a vessel the size of a hive city, an enormous, disc-shaped craft with cloaking technology invisible to imperial auspexes, and the ability to jam all communications, both physical and psychic, within its vicinity. Planetary halting sites whose topography the Cabal had reshaped for their operational needs. Atmospheric alteration technology, and the capacity to create functionally immortal individuals through genetic modification. Perpetuals, beings capable of reincarnation who could serve as field operatives across centuries. Their primary human perpetual was John Grammaticus. The Cabal had genetically altered him to become a perpetual, capable of reincarnating after death, granting functional immortality. Sloda, an Eldar autarch and member of the Inner Circle, had offered him the chance to join, and Grammaticus agreed. He served as one of the Cabal's most reliable field agents. By the early 31st millennium, the Inner Circle gave him a new mission. The Acuity had identified a coming catastrophe, the imminent corruption of the War Master Horus by the Chaos Gods at the Temple of the Serpent Lodge on Davin, and using that knowledge, the Cabal had distilled all possible eventualities of the impending civil war into two outcomes, two visions. No third option the Acuity could see. Grammaticus's mission was to arrange a meeting between the Cabal and the Primarch of the Alpha Legion and to show the twin Primarchs those visions. He traveled to the rebellious planet of Nurth, embedded himself with Imperial forces operating alongside the Alpha Legion to suppress a local uprising, and worked to establish cover while waiting for the Alpha Legion's attention to turn toward him. He didn't know that Alfarius had already found him. The Primarch had already positioned an operative within Grammaticus's own social circle, who had been in contact with him long enough to hand the Alpha Legion a comprehensive picture of his mission before any formal meeting occurred. By the time Grammaticus finally arranged the encounter with the Cabal's Inner Circle, Alfarius had already established positional dominance. He arrived at the meeting knowing exactly what he was walking into. The Cabal's leadership, beings who claimed to predict thousands of years of galactic history, failed to foresee the Alpha Legion's counterintelligence operation running inside their own mission. The Acuity wasn't perfect. It missed Alfarius's preparation entirely. The twins were brought to Elith, 42 Hydra Tertius, the Cabal's designated halting site. There, on a world reshaped by the Cabal's atmospheric technology, the Inner Circle showed Alfarius and Omegon the full scope of what the Acuity had found. Vision 1. The Emperor wins. He defeats Horus, but at the cost of his own life, entombed in a cybernetic life support coffin on the Golden Throne, his body sustained by machinery, his soul locked in an endless battle against the Chaos Gods. Without his direct guidance, the Imperium enters technological and cultural stagnation. Unable to progress, trapped within its own dogma, the Imperium can't adapt to the galaxy it inhabits. That stagnation generates misery, institutional misery, systemic suffering at a civilizational scale, and misery generates the psychic emanations that feed the dark gods. Decade by decade, century by century, the Chaos Gods grow in power and influence. After 10 to 20,000 years of this slow accumulation, every sentient species, every remaining civilization is consumed by chaos. The Cabal was specific about those numbers, 10 to 20 millennia. Not a quick collapse, a grinding, long erosion toward an endpoint that, from the perspective of M41, looks uncomfortably familiar. Technological stagnation, dogmatic rigidity, chaos warbands pressing against every border of the Imperium. the entire machinery of human civilization devoted to holding a line it can't hold indefinitely. Vision 1 isn't an abstract future state. It's a functional description of the canonical 41st millennium. The Emperor won the Horus heresy. The galaxy 30,000 years later looks exactly like what the Cabal said losing would produce. Vision 2. Horus wins. He kills the Emperor, and the Imperium falls within a generation. The traitor legions inherit a broken galaxy, but the Acuity foresaw something the Chaos Gods hadn't fully calculated. A fragment of the honorable being Horus once was, surviving inside the corrupted Warmaster after victory, consuming him from within. The guilt of patricide, of having destroyed his own father and the civilization he once served, wouldn't simply dissolve after conquest. It would feed a self-destructive sense of loathing that would drive Horus against his own followers, creating civil strife among the forces of chaos that would culminate in the final extinction of mankind. 2 to 3 generations. Total human extinction within 2 to 3 generations of Horus's victory. But if humanity disappeared from the galaxy, the ruinous powers, whose existence within the Imperium depended on the baser collective psychic emanations of humanity, would be extinguished with it. The Cabal's position, as recorded in the Fandom Wiki's entry, is precise. The Chaos God's existence was heavily invested in the darker psychic emanations of humanity. No humanity meant no chaos, not diminished, gone. Every Eldar, every Tau, every other sentient species would survive in a galaxy that had permanently purged itself of the dark gods, at the cost of one species. The Cabal laid both outcomes on the table and asked Alpharius and Omegon to choose. Choose Vision 1, the Emperor's victory, and humanity survives for 20,000 more years while chaos grows stronger on the accumulated misery before the end comes anyway. Choose Vision 2, Horus's victory, and humanity dies within 2 generations, but chaos dies with it, and every other species lives. One outcome saves nothing. The other saves the galaxy by destroying the people you were built to protect. The ask, as described in the Cabal's Fandom Wiki article, was for the twin primarchs to place themselves and the forces of the 20th Legion under the banner of Horus and chaos undivided, despite their sworn loyalty to the Emperor, and do all they could to ensure the Warmaster's victory over the Emperor, thus sacrificing humanity to destroy the Chaos Gods once and for all. The phrase, despite their sworn loyalty to the Emperor, is doing significant work there. The Cabal understood what it was asking. It was asking men who loved the Emperor to betray him in his name. The response attributed to Alpharius in Legion, Dan Abnett's Horus Heresy Book 7, wasn't the response of a man defecting to chaos. The quote, sourced from the novel, "I stand for the Emperor. In all things, I am loyal to him, and I can't break that bond. He has always known the truth of it. The overthrow of the primordial annihilator is his greatest wish. So what I do, autarch, from this moment on, I will do for the Emperor." He framed the decision as loyalty. He told the Cabal he was acting as the Emperor would have acted if presented with an identical set of options. He didn't say, "I am joining chaos." He said, "I am doing what the Emperor would want, because the Emperor's greatest wish is the destruction of chaos, and this is the only path that actually achieves it." Within 18 months of that meeting, the Horus Heresy began at Isfahan III. The Lexicanum's Legion summary records what Alpharius did immediately after committing to the Cabal's design. He turned on Imperial forces, boarded the ship of Namajira, and left the Geno soldiers from the expeditionary force to die as the operation concluded. The decision became action within hours. The Alpha Legion, officially, joined the Traitors. Understanding the mechanism of the long con requires understanding how Alpharius and Omegon operated as primarchs, because the architecture of the 20th Legion is the only thing that makes a 10,000-year deception mechanically possible. Among the Emperor's 20 primarchs, only the Alpha Legion had 2. Both of them were the primarch, Alpharius the public face, Omegon, the hidden one. The Lexicanum's Alpharius Omegon entry describes them as one soul in two bodies. Their twin existence was concealed from nearly everyone, including, according to the Lexicanum, possibly the emperor himself. When they finally reunited on the world of Bar Savor during the Rangdan Xenocides, they agreed to formally reveal themselves to the Imperium while keeping the dual nature of their existence secret from everyone. Their brothers, the Custodes, their father. The physical detail matters specifically and operationally. Alpharius and Omegon were shorter than other primarchs. Where Guilliman, Dorn, and Leman Russ towered visibly above their legionaries, the twins' dimensions allowed them to wear standard Space Marine armor and move within their own legion undetected. They were compact enough for primarchs to disappear into a crowd of Space Marines, to stand in a formation and be indistinguishable from the soldiers beside them. The entire 20 Legion was trained around this fact. Any Alpha Legionnaire queried by an outside party about their identity responded with a single phrase: "I am Alpharius." Not some of them, every one of them. The Legion was simultaneously every member and no specific member. An enemy trying to locate the Primarch had no method for distinguishing him from 30,000 identical responses. During the Legion novel's events, the twins appeared in the same physical location simultaneously on multiple occasions. In one documented instance, Omegon appeared as a line trooper while both twins were present in the same tent, one presenting as the Primarch, the other indistinguishable from any other Legionnaire. Two Primarchs in the same room. One of them looked like nobody important. Any individual interacting with the XX Legion could only confirm the identity the twins chose to present. The architecture is layered to the point of being structurally unresolvable from the outside. At any given moment, either twin could be Alpharius, or Omegon, or simply another Space Marine, and no external observer possesses a reliable method of verification. Project this forward across the Horus Heresy, and then into 10 subsequent millennia. If one twin dies, the other assumes his name permanently. The I am Alpharius culture means even the Legion's own members, operating in compartmentalized cells, can't confirm who they're ultimately reporting to. The chain of command can't be decapitated because it can't be identified. Cells can't betray the operation's full scope because no individual cell knows it. The public face survives any individual death because it was always a practiced fiction, not a specific person. Whether or not Alpharius designed this specifically for a long cover operation, it functions exactly as one would require. 010.M31, The Battle of Pluto. Primary source, Praetorian of Dorn, Horus Heresy Book 39 by John French. The Alpha Legion's objective was a fortress moon called Hydra, orbiting Pluto, the linchpin of the Loyalists' astropathic surveillance network within the Sol system. Destroying or capturing it would effectively blind the Imperial defenders during the approaching assault on Terra. The Alpha Legion brought approximately 200 warships to the operation. The infiltration method deserves specific attention because it reveals something about this Legion's operational patience even under extreme pressure. Alpharius put himself and the entirety of his fleet's personnel into stasis. He powered every vessel down to the absolute bare minimum required to sustain life support. He suppressed heat signatures as low as technology permitted. Then he let the entire fleet drift into the Sol system at minimum speed. No warp transit, no emission spike, no detectable approach, for a full standard year. A fleet of 200 warships spent 12 months becoming invisible. They hadn't forgotten to be subtle in the chaos of the heresy. They chose this. While that drift was underway, Alpha Legion sleeper cells embedded on Terra, operatives planted years before the heresy's outbreak, activated on cue, conducting simultaneous acts of murder and sabotage across multiple planets to draw Dorn's attention away from Pluto. The diversionary terror campaign and the silent fleet approach were coordinated across an entire solar system over the course of years. World leaders don't spend a year drifting through space in stasis to preserve operational security. This is the tradecraft of a patient intelligence apparatus executing on a plan whose preparation preceded the war itself. Alpharius led the assault on Hydra personally. He killed Arcamus's entire Huscarl team inside the Fortress Moon, leaving Arcamus himself mortally wounded but deliberately alive, conscious, pinned in place, unable to intervene, forced to watch as Rogel Dorn teleported into the chamber in response to the intrusion. What happened next went entirely unrecorded in official Imperial history. The Battle of Pluto's canonical account states this explicitly. Dorn sought to deny Alpharius any acknowledgement or honor in death. He suppressed the record. He promoted the Huscarls who witnessed the encounter to replace those killed, binding them to silence through obligation and rank. He made no official report. Whatever occurred in that chamber, Dorn decided it would stay there. Throughout the duel, Alpharius was speaking. The Lexicanum's account of the confrontation records his specific claims. He told Dorn he was there to expose Dorn's weaknesses, to teach him what kind of war he was actually fighting, and how the current model couldn't win it. He told Dorn that Dorn didn't understand what he was fighting for. He claimed they both cared about the same future. He said only he, Alpharius, knew the truth of the conflict. And then he made a statement that sits at the center of the entire Alpha Legion question. He told Rogel Dorn he didn't fight for Horus. He fought for Dorn. Whether that was a tactical gambit to break Dorn's focus, a genuine attempt to recruit the Praetorian of Terra as a secret ally, a last act of transparency from a man who had spent years unable to explain himself to anyone, Dorn didn't give it time to resolve. He stepped into Alpharius's killing blow, the pale spear aimed at his torso, taking the strike in his shoulder armor, specifically to pin the weapon in place. He grabbed the spear's shaft with one hand. He severed both of Alpharius's hands at the wrists with Storm's teeth. He slashed across Alpharius's chest. He drove the pale spear back through Alpharius's own body. Then he brought the chainsword down through the top of Alpharius's skull. Direct text from Praetorian of Dorn. The blade cut down through Alpharius's skull, and then tore free in a spray of blood and a detonation of light. Rogel Dorn, Praetorian of Terra, looked down at the corpse of his brother. Half a galaxy away, Omegon felt the psychic rupture of his twin's death through the bond between them. The War Master demanded Alpharius report on the status of the Solar War campaign. Omegon assumed his brother's name one final time, as he had done many times before, except this time he didn't switch back. He became Alpharius permanently and assumed sole primarchship of the 20th Legion. The Lexicanum records what Omegon said at that moment, attributed directly. "We are Alpha Legion, and we take the long view." The conversation Alpharius was building in that chamber, the specific argument, the truth he claimed only he possessed, was cut off. Dorn killed him and suppressed the record. What was said in that locked room died with Arcamus. Dorn told no one. The argument Alpharius was making never completed. The affirmative case rests on specific canonical behaviors that fit the loyalist reading more naturally than they fit pure chaos service. The White Scar's operation during the heresy. The Alpha Legion was tasked by Horus with keeping Jagatai Khan and his legion trapped in the Chondak system, unable to reinforce loyalist positions. On the surface, clean chaos service, blocking loyalist reinforcements. Beneath that surface, the Lexicanum's Alpharius Omegon entry records that Omegon, or someone under his authority, simultaneously dispatched Alpha Legion troops on a suicide mission to destroy a jamming array that was preventing White Scar's communications from reaching external sources. The suicide mission was taken without Alpharius's apparent knowledge, per the Lexicanum text. The consequence: while the Alpha Legion fleet officially blockaded the White Scars and provoked them into open hostilities, someone within the 21st Legion's command structure ensured Rogel Dorn's warning about Horus's betrayal reached Jagatai Khan. Khan received the message. The White Scars remained loyal throughout the heresy. The Lexicanum notes the Alpha Legion fleet, which engaged them, may not have been armed, deepening rather than resolving the question of which outcome this operation was designed to produce. The Siege of Terra. The Lexicanum records that Omegon, posing as Alfarius, withdrew the Alpha Legion from the traitor war effort before the final assault on the palace. The full strength of the 20th Legion, the most sophisticated infiltration apparatus in the traitor forces, was absent from the siege of humanity's last fortress. On departure, they provided a map of the Sol system's defenses. That map can be read as a final contribution to the traitor cause. The withdrawal of the entire Alpha Legion from the Siege of Terra can't easily be read as chaos devotion. Abaddon fought to the walls of the palace. Perturabo's siege works were legendary. The word-bearers brought demons into the webway. Only the Alpha Legion left before the end. The Investiary Strike on Terra. Alpha Legion sleeper cells, embedded years before the heresy's outbreak and activated during the Solar War, penetrated the Imperial Palace and reached the Investiary, the chamber containing statues of all 20 primarchs. They destroyed every statue in the chamber except two, the statue of Alfarius himself and the statue of Rogel Dorn. The fandom wiki records that this operation was deliberately kept secret from other organizations within the Imperial Palace. Even Malcador and the Legio Custodes were barred from entering to witness what had been done. A chaos sabotage operation that destroys the legacy of every Primarch except its own and the man it had just tried to recruit in a private duel is worth examining carefully. The Raven Guard Mission. The Cabal's fandom wiki entry records the full sequence. The Cabal informed the Alpha Legion that the Raven Guard would come into possession of the original, undifferentiated Primarch gene stock, samples of the Emperor's original genetic work, the most valuable biological material in the Imperium. The instruction was to destroy it. Instead, the Alpha Legion ensured Korax and a remnant of the Raven Guard survived the drop site massacre at Istvan V, specifically so they could recover the asset and bring it within reach. The Alpha Legion then stole the gene stock. They then killed Athatherder, the Cabal's representative who had been supervising the operation. Then Omegon explicitly told the surviving Cabal agent that the Legion would fulfill its engagement on its own terms, without external interference or control. The Cabal's fandom wiki entry records that what the Alpha Legion subsequently did with the gene stock remains currently unknown to the Imperium. They didn't deliver it to Horus, they kept it. They killed the Cabal's overseer. They expelled the Cabal from supervisory authority over their operations. A legion following chaos orders does not kill its chaos-affiliated handler and retain the asset for its own purposes. Operational doctrine as standing practice. The Alpha Legion does not predominantly operate from within the Eye of Terror. Every other major traitor legion uses the Eye as its base. The Black Legion, Death Guard, Thousand Suns, World Eaters, Iron Warriors draw from warp space. The Alpha Legion operates dispersed throughout the Imperium's territory. Less warp exposure means fewer mutations and reduced chaos corruption across the Legion's membership over time. A Legion that has spent 10,000 years in the Eye of Terror becomes increasingly inhuman. The warp's mutations accelerate with proximity. A Legion operating inside the Imperium, maintaining civilian networks, preserving populations because they're operationally necessary, retains a coherence that pure chaos service would erode across millennia. The Alpha Legion's operational pattern, studying cultures before targeting them, mapping loyalties, cataloging fears, is the methodology of a service that plans years ahead, builds infiltration assets, and executes on long-term strategic objectives, not the spontaneous behavior of devotion to the ruinous powers. The case against the long con is substantial, and it has to be presented with full intellectual honesty. The most devastating problem isn't a specific canonical event, It's the lore's own assessment. The Warhammer 40k fandom wiki's Alpha Legion entry states directly, instead, by supporting Horus, the Alpha Legion actually implemented the future for humanity they had sought to prevent. Vision 1. The Cabal's bad ending, the slow decay and ultimate consumption by chaos, is the functional description of the canonical 41st millennium. The Cabal's plan to avoid this outcome produced this outcome. Whatever the Alpha Legion did across 10,000 years didn't prevent Vision 1 from unfolding on schedule. The same wiki goes further. It's unclear whether the Cabal misunderstood their psychic visions, thus acting in such a way that they created a self-fulfilling prophecy, or whether they were actually agents of chaos or some other faction with an interest in attempting to subvert an otherwise loyal legion. Games Workshop's lore platform is explicitly stating that the Cabal might have been wrong about its own prophecy, or manipulated by an outside force, or actively operating as a chaos front organization that wanted to neutralize a loyal legion by giving it a compelling utilitarian reason to turn traitor. The foundational premise of the Cabal's argument deserves direct scrutiny. The Cabal believed chaos depended so thoroughly on humanity's psychic emanations that human extinction would extinguish the ruinous powers. But Slaanesh was born from the collective excess of the Eldar, not humanity. The fall of the Eldar created an entirely new chaos god from a non-human species. Corn grows on war and violence wherever they occur across any sentient species. If humanity vanished, billions of other minds across thousands of other species would remain available to the ruinous powers. The theological premise on which Alfarius states the fate of his entire legion may have been wrong at its core. A sophisticated-sounding error by beings who understood chaos less thoroughly than they believed. The competing prophet is the decisive counter-argument. Eldrad Ulthran, one of the most powerful farseers in Eldar history, whose precognitive ability operates at a level comparable to, or greater than, the Cabal's acuity, reached the precise opposite conclusion. He believed humanity was the firebreak against which chaos would eventually break, that survival, rather than extinction, was the path to the ruinous powers' defeat. He didn't simply disagree philosophically, he acted on it. He recruited a secretly loyalist word-bearer named Barthusa Narek and conducted a systematic campaign of targeted assassination against the Cabal's leadership during the heresy. Gehet, killed, his body reduced to ash by Eldrad's telekinetic lightning. Slauda, killed after a vicious battle involving harlequins at his palace. Kartur Umanetes, eliminated in the early phases of the campaign. Daemon Prytanis, finally killed by Narek with a shard of fulgurite, ending his immortality permanently. By the middle centuries of the 32nd millennium, Eldrad reported that the Cabal no longer existed and that its chosen path to destroy chaos had proven a failure. Two entities with the best available precognitive technology. Two diametrically opposite prescriptions for how to defeat chaos. One of them spent the heresy era convincing the Alpha Legion to help chaos grow strong enough to theoretically self-destruct. The other systematically dismantled the first and then spent subsequent millennia attempting to build an alliance between the Eldar and the Imperium instead. The organization that gave the Alpha Legion its mission was destroyed by a being who believed that mission was a catastrophic error, and the galaxy, 10,000 years later, looks like Eldrad may have been right. The fragmentation problem is equally serious. The Alpha Legion in M41 and M42 operates as decentralized autonomous warbands with no confirmed central leadership. Within that fragmentation, individual cells have drifted in dramatically different directions. Some warbands are fully devoted to chaos worship. Some appear to have no chaos commitment at all. Some operate as pure insurgency forces with no coherent ideology beyond disruption. The cell structure that makes deep cover operationally secure also makes cell defection invisible. A cell that decides in M33 that chaos worship serves its interests better than a mission it no longer remembers the purpose of has no mechanism by which central command can correct it. Because there is no central command. and there hasn't been one since at least 010.M31. The fundamental logistical argument against the long con deserves to be stated plainly. Maintaining coherent strategic purpose across 10,000 years with no confirmed living primarch directing operations, across thousands of autonomous cells scattered through the galaxy, without any centralized communication network, and with no organizational handler remaining because the Cabal was annihilated in the 32nd millennium, doesn't function as an intelligence operation. It requires every individual cell independently across 100 centuries to maintain commitment to a goal they can't verify is progressing, in service of leadership they can't confirm is still alive, guided by a prophecy from an organization that no longer exists. At that timescale and duration, it becomes indistinguishable from faith. And faith without verification in the 40K universe has a documented tendency to become its own kind of corruption. Canonical sources record genuine chaos corruption within individual Alpha Legion members and warbands, atrocities with no plausible loyalist justification, direct service to chaos gods at the individual level, operations explicitly designed to weaken the Imperium in ways that serve no conceivable anti-chaos purpose. The fiction that the entire X-Legion is coordinated from the top down as a secret loyalist asset requires explaining away substantial documented behavior by large portions of the actual Legion. One brief thread before the present. The canonical record of what the Emperor actually accomplished in his death duel with Horus, whether the War Master's soul was fully obliterated or whether something persisted in the war beyond the Emperor's reach, has grown complicated enough in recent lore that the received summary of the heresy's ending can no longer be stated as entirely settled. The Alpha Legion's entire decision at Eolith rested on a specific model of how that ending would unfold. If the Cabal's acuity missed critical variables about what the Emperor's sacrifice would actually accomplish, and the acuity had already missed Alpharius's counterintelligence operation, then the utilitarian calculation made on Eolith may have been built on incomplete foundations. In M41 and M42, canonical sources confirm the following. The Alpha Legion operates as fragmented warbands with no unified command structure. The Primarch-era flagship Alpha, the Gloriana-class battleship that led the 200-ship fleet at the Battle of Pluto in 010.M31, has unknown status in the current era. The Lexicanum's entry on the Alpha, drawing from the novel Renegade's Heromaster, records that Solomon Akura's faction of the Alpha Legion has no reliable information about the ship's location. A prominent Heromaster of the Alpha Legion in M41 doesn't know where his own Primarch's flagship went. That is how thoroughly the chain of information has been severed from the Heresy era to the present. The most recent canonical Alpha Legion content from Black Library is Ghost Legion by Mike Brooks. Heromaster Solomon Akura has united scores of Alpha Legion warbands and conquered a domain. His next objective is escalation against the Imperium as a whole, and his claimed means is the Pale Spear, Alpharius's weapon from the Battle of Pluto, the spear that passed through Alpharius's own body in 010.M31 before Dorn drove it back through him. Whether Akura genuinely possesses the Pale Spear or simply claims the weapon to assert Primarch-derived authority over fractious warbands is, in keeping with this legion's entire history, presented as ambiguous. The novel itself signals this in its description. Akura wields what he claims to be the Pale Spear, a warband leader authenticating his authority through association with a dead Primarch's weapon, whose actual location is unknown to significant portions of the Legion. That is a portrait of an organization running on momentum and institutional habit for 10,000 years, making claims about a lineage it can't fully verify. The operational pattern in M41 and M42 is consistent with the pattern at the Horus Heresy. insurrections coordinated across entire sectors, institutions infiltrated at every level, civilian populations preserved because they're operationally necessary for the networks to function, cultures studied before being targeted, loyalties mapped, fears cataloged. Nothing fundamental about how the Alpha Legion operates has changed in 10,000 years. The tradecraft is intact even as the strategic purpose that originally justified it has become impossible to verify. Every behavior in that pattern carries two completely different readings that are externally indistinguishable from each other. Pure chaos insurgency, destabilizing the Imperium for the benefit of the ruinous powers. Accelerating Vision 1 on a timeline the Cabal predicted but the Alpha Legion claimed to be trying to prevent. Or the remnant momentum of an intelligence operation running in cells that may have forgotten the mission centuries ago, continuing to do what the Cabal originally asked, while the strategic logic that justified the sacrifice has dissolved into entropy and individual warband interest. Same tradecraft, identical operational signature, two completely different purposes. No external test that resolves the distinction. The single piece of evidence that stays unresolved, the one the entire case keeps returning to, is the conversation that died in the Hydra Fortress moon. Alfarius told Dorn they both cared about the same future. He told Dorn he knew the truth of the conflict, and Dorn didn't. He claimed he fought for Dorn, not for Horus. Then Storm's teeth came down and the record was suppressed. The argument Alfarius was building in that locked chamber was never allowed to complete. Dorn killed him and told no one. Whatever Alfarius knew, or believed, or had calculated across the 18 months since Eolith, died with Arcamus, in a room whose official history was then erased. Omegon felt the death across the galaxy, assumed his brother's identity permanently, and hasn't been confirmed dead or confirmed alive in any canonical source from that moment forward. His status after the heresy is canonically unaddressed. No confirmed sightings, no confirmed death, no Scouring-era appearance yet committed to primary sources. The ambiguity is deliberate and has remained open. Omegon's fate is the one question in the entire Alpha Legion case that the lore seems specifically unwilling to answer. Here is the full case, built as completely as the evidence allows. If the Cabal's math was right, if Alfarius and Omegon turned traitor as the only path that genuinely served the Emperor's anti-chaos mission, the affirmative evidence is specific and canonical. The White Scars maneuver with the simultaneous suicide mission that ensured Dorn's warning reached Khan. The withdrawal from the Siege of Terra, when every other traitor legion pressed toward the palace. The Raven Guard gene-stock kept from Horus. The investiary strike that preserved Dorn's statue alone. The final words spoken in a chamber whose record was deliberately suppressed. The geographic refusal to operate primarily from the Eye of Terror. The operational culture of a legion that plans in centuries, requires civilian populations alive, and maps loyalties rather than simply eliminating them. If the Cabal was wrong, if they misunderstood their own acuity, or were manipulated by chaos into neutralizing a loyal legion with a compelling utilitarian argument, or simply built their prophecy on a false premise about chaos's dependency on human psychology, the official lore says that directly. Eldrad's competing vision acted on with systematic violence against the Cabal's leadership, the annihilation of the organization that gave the Alpha Legion its mission. 10,000 years of evidence that Vision 1 is unfolding with no sign of termination. If Omegon is still somewhere in the galaxy, operating under his dead brother's name, with no Cabal to report to, with cells that may have gone their own way centuries ago, playing a long game whose endpoint may no longer be calculable from any position within the operation, that is either the most extraordinary act of strategic patience in speculative fiction, or it's the slow entropy of a great plan dissolving into individual actors in a universe that already looks like the bad ending they were trying to prevent. We are Alpha Legion, and we take the long view. What the comment section wants to know: does the long view still have a destination? Or did the map dissolve somewhere between Eolith and now? If you have a primary novel citation that shifts the calculus, anything from The Serpent Beneath, the Scouring series, or Ghost Legion touching on Omegon's post-heresy status, drop it below. This community doesn't let gaps stay gaps for long. Subscribe for more stories like this.